Well, certainly I am a living testament or instrument or vehicle or recipient of a great deal of hatred, threats and violence. And I think in British terms it's quite exceptional what I've been through over the last 30 plus years. I've had more or less non-stop hate mail and death threats, which continue to this day. In the early days it was mainly from the National Front and other far-right organisations. Nowadays it's mainly from Islamist organisations and other religious fanatics. Yeah, I mean, my home has been attacked over 50 times, including 3 arson attacks and a bullet through the front door. I've been physically beaten up in the street over 300 times. If you look at my smile, it looks okay, but all these teeth are reconstructed because they've been bashed and chipped and cracked by successive attacks. As many of you know, when I went to Moscow to support the very brave, courageous LGBT campaigners there, I was targeted by neo-Nazis and almost knocked unconscious, but had very severe blow to the head, and which damaged my both brain and eyesight. It's only minor, but and nothing by comparison to what happens to other Russian activists who live there all the time. They end up, permanently disabled and sometimes even killed. So it's been quite a struggle, and at times a very, very hard experience to bear. It's not what you expect in a civilized democratic society to go through that for expressing a point of view. So particularly in the 1980s, when I was very vocal, perhaps the major public face for LGBT rights, I was a magnet for homophobes all over the country, and even all over the world. There was an attempt to throw me under a train at Coventry Station late one night after I'd been speaking there. Coming back from Nottingham one night, or one day in fact, there was an attempt. I had the misfortune of unintentionally getting on a train with BNP supporters who actually physically tried to throw me out of the train window, speeding train. There have been several attempts to run me down in cars and vans. It's been like living through a low-level civil war for about 30 years. Now, the homophobic attacks are much less than they were, which is a great reflection on the changes of public attitudes in our society. So in many ways, I was or have been or are a barometer of social homophobia. The fact that the scale of violence is not so great is indicative of how public attitudes have changed. But, I still get these attacks, and I've got to say that for the most part, although there have been some cases where the police have been very supportive and helpful, for the most part, the police have been absolutely hopeless. So, for example, I received a whole series of very explicit threats to kill me by Islamist extremists. And one time, these are phone calls, one time the person forgot to do the 141, and I managed to phone back and got the number, and with help of friends traced who it was. But even then the police refused to decline taking action. So yeah, it has been tough.
So why that with Salman Rushdie then? What do you think?
Well, he was much more famous than I am, and much more part of the establishment, I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
It's really weird.
The other thing is, I suppose, I've also had a great deal of attacks from people on the so-called left. I'm a bête noire for much of the left because I don't follow the party line. So I speak out against the abuses by Islamists and by Islamist regimes like Iran. Much of the left takes the view that Iran is under threat from the United States. Iran opposes the US, so therefore we mustn't say anything against Iran. My view is human rights are universal. When women, gay people, ethnic minorities, students and workers are being victimized and persecuted in Iran, in some cases being executed, we have a duty to stand with them. And for this I'm denounced as a neocon, a lapdog of imperialism and so on. Because I've spoken out against Hamas rocket attacks on Israeli civilians, I'm again denounced as a Zionist. On the other hand, if I speak out against Israel's indiscriminate attacks on civilians, the other side denounces me as well. So, whatever. It's tough, but by comparison to many human rights campaigners, I think I've got away pretty light. If you're in Russia, Iran, Uganda, you could easily end up dead. I've never been imprisoned, I've never been tortured, I've never suffered really serious violent attacks. I'm not disabled as a result, so I count myself lucky, and I pay tribute to all those very inspiring activists in countries who, despite the risk of imprisonment, torture and even murder, carry on the good fight for human rights.
I think it's quite a cup of tea after all.